Thanks for joining. We're giving everyone a few minutes to join, and then we'll get started in just a little bit. It's great to see everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we're giving everyone just a few minutes to join, and then we'll get started. I see everybody in the chat saying hi. Oh, I see someone's here in Seattle with me. Hi there. Yeah, we have a warm day here with sun. It's kind of rare for Seattle. It's not raining and it's actually like, I think 48 degrees or something like that. All right. So it looks like we've got everybody here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with some of our intro. The class tonight is going to be recorded. It hasn't started recording yet, but I'll let you know when it does. There will be a replay of tonight's class that'll be available on michaels.com/classes. And the best way to find this video is to visit that link and then click on the circle that says beads and jewelry. And it'll show in order of most recent to oldest, all of the classes that have been recorded so far. There's quite a few that we've done. John Bead has done with Michaels. So you can go through, if you're new to these classes, some of our previous projects. It's fun to see. And there's also a handout available that we prepared for the class. It'll show you step-by-step everything I'm going to show you tonight. So something I wanted to say about class in general is we're trying to put a lot of information into 1 hour. So I want to give you guys everything you need to go home and make one of these projects and know step-by-step how to do it. And, you know, when you encounter those little things along the way, I'm going to try to cover all of that as well. So because of that, and because class is only an hour, we like to recommend, especially for new beaders, that if you're trying to follow along while I'm working, you might find that I'm going too fast. And so we recommend for folks watching who are new to beading that, you know, just watch the class once, and then when you're working on it, use the replay where you can pause it and, you know, finish that step and then play it again. So that was just a suggestion I thought I would throw out there, especially as we start working on some projects that might be a little new and some of the techniques might be new. This one tonight, as one I haven't seen before, is one that I just came up with when I was, you know, just playing with some of the round Czech glass beads from the Michaels bead wall. And so tonight is the, it's called Raspberry Chocolate Swirl. I named it that because as I was creating this one, I was going for some contrast with the 8mm beads. And I found these iris brown beads. These are a size 10, iris brown. And I thought, wow, so it looks like kind of like a chocolate. I may have had a chocolate on my mind at the time. So that's where that came from. And this technique can work with a lot of different beads, a lot of different bead sizes. The project I'm covering tonight is going to just keep it simple. It's going to have one bead size and one seed bead size, and then one big bead size. But I have done versions of this where these beads are different sizes and the seed beads are different, and you can put little crystals on the outside and just all kinds of possibilities. So we can talk through that. But I'm going to go ahead and switch my camera now to show you a detailed view of the project and to show you the materials. All right. So here's the finished samples. And the first thing you'll notice is that I've got a magnetic clasp on them. So they're really fun, really quick designs. You can just, you know, when you're getting ready, just pop them on. I like the magnetic clasp for that. It's a little fun way to create an everyday piece. The materials that I've used are these 8mm beads, and they are, they're just Czech glass. This has a cool marble finish on it, and it's like a raspberry tone to it. So there's that. On the sample that we were sharing on social media earlier, I used a, what is a quartz, a dyed quartz. And that is, it's called Imitation Ruby Kyanite, 8mm. It's got a really gorgeous color. And we made an earring version of it as well. So I thought, hey, what a cool little gift set that you could do for somebody for the holidays. So there's one example. And those are the 8mm beads. Tonight I'm going to work with another glass bead that is a turquoise. That's seems to be a really great color for the camera. I noticed with the marbling it was a little hard to see. So tonight I'm going to work with these, and these are 8mm Czech glass. Okay, the seed beads. So for tonight's project, I'm going to be using size 10 seed beads. And I've got different colors out. You'll notice my samples, those are worked in solid colors. But I'm going to work with 3 colors tonight so I can show you the different steps in different colors. And I'll give you a pretty good idea of the layering. But on these samples, I used just one color. In this case, it was the brown iris. And in this case, it was the ivy color. And looks like this. It's a pretty mix of just all ivy. So that's what's used in this one. Okay, you'll also need Wildfire beading thread. This is the 0.006 size. And that's a good size for going through the 10s. We're going to have to pass through the 10s or the 11s if you're using 11s multiple times. So I would stick to the 0.06 on that. You'll need size 10 beading needles. If you have 12s and you want to use those, that will work as well. So 10s here, 12s will also work. And magnetic clasps. The ones that I showed you on the samples are these. They're the bead lining clasps. Or you could also use silver. They have a silver version that's really pretty. I think there's also a gold. These are the ones I have on hand, but you can use any clasp you like. So for tools, not a lot of tools needed tonight. I'm going to be using a pair of scissors, and really that's it. So on that note, I'm going to get started. The first thing I'm going to do is cut the thread. And this is going to use a lot of thread. You're going to want to have a 30-inch tail and then enough working thread to do, the first 2 back and forth steps. So the way the bracelet is worked is we build up and then build back down and then use the tail to build back up on the other side. So for that reason, 30-inch tail and about 40 to 60 inches of length on the working side. So for me, I'm going to cut something pretty close to about, almost 90 inches or so. That'll probably be too much, but I'd rather have enough. All right. And so threading my needle. I'm going to get out a pair of chain nose pliers. And I'm going to use them to flatten the end of the thread. And this will make it easier to get it through the eye of the needle. I'll try to actually catch there. Here we go. All right. And so I'm not going to pull on this. I'm just going to pinch it with a little bit of strength. You can see it gets a little bit flatter. And then I'm grabbing a beading needle here. And there we go, threaded. And so I've got a lot of extra working length, so I'm going to pull down more than, I usually, pull 7 inches and fold it over. I pulled more like 12 inches there and folded it over. So we're going to be going through a few times. And to measure my 30-inch tail, I'm going to use okay, so we're going to need a stop bead. And to do that, I'm going to dump out my color, first color here. To do that, you'll want to pick up one bead and pull it down. and then go through that bead again, pass through in the same direction as you did when you were stringing it, and pull tight. And there's a stop bead. Okay, and now I'm going to get the 8mm beads out. And these have a little knot at the bottom, so I'm going to just trim that. And so for step 1, just string that bead. And so what I'm doing with color, I want to show you guys what I'm doing here. There's going to be core beads. There's going to be a size 10 bead in between each subsequent size 8mm bead. So I'm going to use a different color for my arms, a different color for the core. The core beads are brown. The arm beads are red. And then when I get to the step where we cross over, I'm going to switch to yellow. And actually, I wanted to ask really quick while I've got everybody, I could also use white for my core beads. I wasn't sure which one I'd end up going with in the end, but here's what white will look like. I'm thinking the brown is going to be a little easier to see. So yeah, we'll go with that. I'm in the afternoon sun here earlier, and now it's just starting to set. And so my light changed again just since we did our prep. All right, here we go. So we'll do that. Okay, so we've got our stop bead. Got our 8mm bead. And I'm going to pick up 8 size 10 beads, and I'm using this red color, Cinnabar red. Okay, so there's those. Come back through that bead in the same direction you strung it. And pull tight. And now pick up another core bead, so another size 10 seed bead there. And an 8mm bead. And now 8 more of the arm beads. And so I am working these in a different color so you can tell the beads apart since they're the same size. I wanted you to be able to see each step in a different color. I'm hoping that helps a little bit. And so I went back through the bead I just added, headed in the same direction that I strung it, but this time I guided those arm beads to sit on the other side. Now, if you were to pick this up and move it around, they would stay a little bit, but they might move, and don't worry about it if they do. This one that I made earlier that I was going to use to show the steps more than once, you see how they move a little bit? Because I haven't done the step that locks them down yet. Don't sweat it. You can fix it while we're working on it. So right now, just for this part we're doing here, you can guide them to sit, but don't worry too much about the position of them because it will be fixable later. So again, another core bead, size 10. And if you're using size 11s, all these steps should be the same. And I'll show you when we do the crossover beads where we're using an 11 might have one small difference, but these are size 10s that I'm using here. Okay, and so there's 4. There's 4 more, so there's a total of 8. And come up through the 8mm bead. And there you go. Another size 10 seed bead for the core bead. And another 8mm bead. And then 8 more of these. And so you see I'm just looping around each of the beads and adding a cord bead, another big bead, bring it down, and then pick up 8 of the size 10 seed beads. There's 8. And then come back up. Okay, I'm going to do this 2 more times, and then I'm going to show you guys the next step. And the next step, I can show that more than once. I have a few samples. I could also show restarting it again at the end if there's time. But I think I want to make sure there's time to show you guys all of the steps before repeating this one. But I can try to do that again at the end. So adding 8. Here's 8 beads on the needle. It can help sometimes to bring them down. And then come back up through just the 8mm bead here. But that's the whole process for creating the first part of the bracelet. And you'll want to create this to be a length that's about 1/2 inch less than the length you'd like it to be worn at. This ending here is going to add 1 inch. So as you're working, you can measure it, decide on a length. My samples have, I made them about 6 1/4. And then with the clasp, they're 7 1/4. So if that helps anyone decide how many beads to add. Okay. And so I'm picking up 8 more of these 10s. And I'm going to come back up through the 8mm bead one more time. And what I'm doing here is just a mini version so I can show you guys the steps in a way, and you'll be able to see the whole piece here, but we'll do a full-size version after this. Okay, so that's the end of that step. Now what we're going to do is add one side of the clasp. So you want to get your clasp out. And then pick up 6 beads. So 6 seed beads. Go through the clasp. And I should mention also, if you're using one of these, you'll need to put 3 on, go through the clasp, and then put on the other 3, because the loop is too small to slide over a size 10 seed bead. But if you were using just a jump ring, or you're making an earring, for example, and adding a jump ring, you could finish this step without putting the hardware on yet. That makes sense there. But in the case of this, with the built-in connection, I've added 3, gone through the clasp, and then added 3. Bring that down. And so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the 8 arm beads on this side. So we added those 3 clasp and 3, and now I'm going through here. I've just gone through 1 for now because that's about as far as I can get without my magnetic clasp sticking to the needle there. But I'm going to continue through the rest of them. Oops. You know, it's going to be a little loose at first, but we're going to repeat this one more time and it'll tighten it up a lot. Go through those 3. Okay, so I went through all 8 of the arm size 10 seed beads. Now I'm going to come up through the 8mm bead, just the 8mm bead for now. And then the next thing I'm going to do is continue through all 6 of those beads and the clasp. So the 6 brown beads here that we just added. It'll probably let me go through those 3 and come through the clasp. Go through the next 3. And I went ahead and went straight down that spiral side. Continuing through all 8 of those again. Now, if you'd like, you can reinforce the connection up here one more time. But what I find happens is at the next step, when I bring the working thread up, I use the working thread to reinforce that one more time at the end as part of my weaving in. So that's why I've only gone through this twice. And I'll show you guys that when we get there. Okay, so I've exited from the 8 arm beads, and I'm going to switch to a new color now so that it's really easy to see what I'm doing. So exiting from the last arm, pick up 3 of your size 10 seed beads. This is where, if you're using size 11 seed beads, I personally liked the look of 4 more at this spot, but 3 worked. 3 worked fine. 4 looked a little fuller. So play with that if you're using 11s and see what you like, but they will both work. And so, you know, just try it and see what you like. So here's where you want to pay a little bit of attention. So we've gone through these 8 arm beads. We're going to skip the core bead. Don't go through the core bead. That's the one that we added in between the 2 8s. Skip over it. Go through the other side arm. We're going to go all the way around that. So I just went through the first bead there. And pull tight. And you see how that lays on the top? This is how you can get it to sit without moving. That's the trick for getting those to stay on the sides of the beads where you place them. So I'm just going to quickly go through and show that. And what I'm doing now is traveling through all 8 of those arm beads so that I can exit from the last one. Okay. And then 3 of the size 10 beads again. Go through. Locks it right in place. And now I'm just traveling. I'm traveling through that arm of beads, those 8 that go around the side. Okay, and then you'll want to pick up 3 more of your size 10 seed beads. Go through the next arm. And it is that easy. That's really all there is to this design. You've seen it. I'm going to show the finishing of the other side by getting there. Travel through here. And pick up 3. And skip over the core bead. And go through the next arm. And then just keep traveling down through all the arm beads. And I'm going to finish this, but before I do, I want to show you guys just a quick glance of the other side. So I'm turning it over. And you see those core beads on the other side. Those are still visible there. But on this front side, I've completely covered them up with the traveling beads going around. So they're starting the next one there. I actually really like the look of having a different color for this step. I hadn't tried that before. The idea came to me for showing how to do it, but that's really cool, isn't it? And keep going through here. All right, and so the last one. Picking up 3 more. Exiting from there, the last 8, the last of the 8 arm beads, skipping the core bead, going through the next arm here. There it is. So if this was a full length bracelet that we had just worked through all, 6 1/4 inches of it, your thread would be getting pretty short, the working thread. And so at this point, you would just weave it in. And so to do that, you'd come up through this 8mm bead. And for now, I'm just going to come up through the 8mm bead. And I'm going to try not to go through my arm beads. That's a little easier to do on the other side. So this is the working thread coming out of the last arm, going through the 8mm bead. And this is described in the handout too. For now, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave my thread hanging out here on this 8mm bead spot. That's my working thread. And if this was a full length bracelet, it would be a really short working length right now, which is why it helps to switch now to the tail thread we left. Remember we left that 30 inches of tail. This is what that was for. So I'm going to flatten that end with my chain nose pliers so that I can get a needle on it easier. I left the needle on my other working thread. I'm going to weave that in at the end. And the reason I'm not weaving it in now is just in case I need it. I might want to reinforce the clasp with it. And so that's why I suggest keeping it. This is our stop bead. Remember we added that stop bead before we put our 8mm bead on? I'm going to want to pull that off now. So to do that, just kind of pull it with your thumbnail will be able to move it. And I'm going to go through it with my needle now. When you do that, it'll still be on your string. It'll be the first of the 6 beads that I'm going to add. So we're just doing the other side of the clasp now. So picking up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I always forget to do this, but because my clasp can't go through the beads, I've added just those 3. Put those 3 on there. Sorry about that. Okay, so there's 3. Taking that clasp piece over here, go through it. And it's magnetic, so it will stick to your needle, but just have to keep moving it out of the way a little bit. And pick up 3 more beads. So that's a total of 6. And now, same as we did on this side, we're going to go through these arm beads. And then we're going to come back up through the 8mm bead. So that's what I'm doing here. And this side will be easier because the arm beads are not loose. They were secured in that first step, so a little bit easier on this side. So see, I just went through those 8 arm beads. And now I'm going to go back through the 8mm bead. And through those 6 beads and the clasp. So I'm traveling through the clasp here. Back down. There we go. All right, so far what I've done is I've gone through the first 3 beads of that arm. I'm gonna flip it over. And this thread is the old working thread. We're just getting that out of the way. And if that old working thread was making, getting in the way or just being frustrating, you could always weave it in now. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to keep going with it, kind of press that out of the way. So here's my working thread. I went through the first 3 beads of the arm. I'm going to go through the rest of those beads for a total of 8. And keep going. Okay, one more that I didn't get through there. And as you're exiting from that last bead, try not to go underneath the thread. So you've got the thread that the core bead's running through. Stay above it. And to test that, you can pull and just make sure that it wasn't caught underneath it. And then pick up 3 more beads. And I might use another color just so you can see the back versus the front. So here's 3 new beads, size 10. And I'm going to skip over the core bead and go through all 8 arm beads that are around this 8mm bead. And there's the back locked in place. And that's all that's left to do. We'll come down through all these beads, traveling through them. Got one more here. And then picking up 3 new beads, cross over the core bead, and go through the next arm beads. Oops, I picked up yellow. I meant to pick up the white ones. Sorry about that. And then again, if you were using size 11s, I'm using 10s here today. But if you were using size 11 seed beads, 4 beads in this position might look fuller. It might look better. You'll have to decide what you like when you create yours, but I liked the look of 4 with size 11s. I like the look of 3 with size 10s. That's just my preference. I believe the stitch will work with any count. One other thing I wanted to just quickly mention while I'm here, if you wanted to make this form a shape, you could use a larger bead here. So say if you put like a size 8 seed bead, or even like a little 3mm bead, it would force the beads to form a curve as you worked. And they would hold that shape. So that gives you the possibility of making a bangle without a clasp. And to do that, instead of adding a clasp at the end, you could just keep going through your 8mm beads. So that's just something to think about if you're an advanced beader and you wanted a little way to take this up a notch. That's something you could do. I'm just now continuing through all of the 8 beads that were added as an arm bead around here. Okay, and then 3 more size 10s. How are we doing on time? We're doing good on time. So I'm going to quickly go through adding this, and then I'm going to show you weaving in, and then I think I'll have time to show you again. Okay, so going through. And the best part is when you're on this last step, you can pick it up and move it around without really losing the orientation of those, waves that we made, the arm waves. It makes it easier to work with, I think. There's 3 more. Skipping the core bead, going through those 8 arm beads. Go through there. Okay. There's 3 more. And to the last one here. Okay, 3 more. Skipping the core bead, going through those 8 beads that are around the size 8mm bead. There we go. I'm going to keep going. It's starting to get a little tight. So when I got to this top one, keep in mind, this was my 4th pass through those 10s. If you were using 11s, a size 10 beading needle would help out a lot here. It'll still work with a 10. I've done that before, but you might need to use your chain nose pliers to kind of pull your needle through, which, you know, it'll work. But right now, I am using a size 10, and it is going through a 4th time through my size 10 seed beads without too much problem. I'm putting some strength on it, but it's working. Okay, so I exited from the last of the 8 arm beads. And you remember when we only went through our clasp twice before, and I mentioned I was going to reinforce it now? That's what I'm going to do now, is I'm going to go through the clasp again, and then through my 8mm bead and weave in. And I'm just going to do that quickly because I think it makes sense to everyone. But please feel free to jump in if there's questions about that. Just going through the clasp here and down through. I went through these beads, and I'm just going to go ahead and continue straight through that 8mm bead. And here's what's going to happen when you start going through the center beads. You're not going to be totally sure if you've made it through the core bead or not. But and right now on the camera, it's not easy enough to see, but right now I'm only exiting from the 8mm bead. I'd like to keep going. I'd like to go through the core bead. It is possible to see it. You just kind of bend the work open a little bit, and you'll be able to see that bead exiting from your core bead. And you can keep going. The reason I want to go down through this one is I don't want to try to go through this arm one more time. It's just too tight. So I'm continuing down through my next 8mm bead. And now I'm exiting with my needle on top of the work. See, it's not underneath the wave. It's coming out of the 8mm bead and not crossing over these. And my clasp is really strong on there. So that's 3 passes through the clasp. It's really good. Okay, so a trick to weaving in here. Go ahead and go back through your 8s. Sorry, the 8 size 10 seed beads that are on this side. I started calling them my 8s because there's 8 of them, but they're not size 8. There we go. So I went through 2, and it's tight, so I'm going to get through 3 here, and 3 more. See if it lets me get through 3. All right. And if it gets tight, use your pliers. Just give it a pull. It should work just fine. And now I'm exiting from that last arm bead. I'm going to try to go just through my 8mm bead and go back down. And this time I'm going to continue down through the next core bead and the next 8mm bead. And once again, exiting from that 8mm bead on top of the stitch work. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I've come out of the 8mm bead on top of the stitch work. There we go. Okay. And you'll do the same thing. We'll do the same thing again. Weave through here. If you're one of those people that doesn't love weaving in, and you want to tie a knot, and you're going to do it anyway, let me show you where to do it. So here's the 8mm bead. I'm underneath the core bead. I haven't gone through it yet. You can go around. See, I'm passing through the stitching back here. So this thread is just sitting on top of the 8mm bead. It's not going through any of the waves. Come through the loop here. and there's one knot. And that knot is sitting on top of the 8mm bead before the core bead. So it's not going to go through the core bead. That's one way you could knot if you'd like to, and it would be pretty hidden. And another thing to think about when you're weaving in, if you have the length left in your working or tail thread and you want to go down through all the beads again to strengthen it up, you can do that. And on one of these really long pieces, a little extra strength between them works, but you don't need to, because these waves also are providing some structural strength to your bracelet. But if you have the thread, why not go all the way through? So that's what I've done here. Just started to weave in. Eventually I'll trim it. Same thing with this side. Here's my old working thread. You remember I left it exiting from the top of that 8mm bead. What I would do is I'd go through one more, weave it through, go down through two, weave it through, go down through. And I'd probably trim it after 2 passes, maybe 3. And that's it. That's the whole bracelet. So we're at a 15-minute mark. I can show 2 things we can do. I can show adding the wave one more time on a finished sample that's full length, or I can show starting it again. And I'm going to look to you guys for some lead on that. What would you guys like to see?
Hi, Danielle, it's Carmi.
Hey, Carmi.
I just wanted to let you know sidebar is good. Everyone seems to be following along and understanding. So maybe with the few minutes left, it would be great if you would just start it again, because we did have a few people come in a little late.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. So I'm going to just quickly re-go through the materials that are out on my mat. I've got this 8mm Czech glass bead, and I've got size 10 seed beads on the mat. The colors I have out, or sorry, yeah, the colors, but this one's got an open cap. I don't want to dump that. I've got the iris brown. I've got a white seed bead, red size 10 seed bead, and yellow. And I'm doing different colors just so you guys can see the steps in different colors. But they're all size 10s. And this is a size 8mm. And the thread I'm using is Wildfire 0.006. And the instructions will tell you to cut a pretty big amount of thread. If you're making a full-size bracelet, 90 inches might be a little too much, but not too much. Not too much over what you need. The reason is you're going to leave a 30-inch tail. And I just thought that was an easier way to, not to have a ton of thread to work with and not having to add thread. So cutting about, between 75 and 90 inches of thread for a 7-inch bracelet. And I'm going to flatten the end. Pick up a size 10 beading needle. And if you want to use a 12, you can use a 12. 12s are great as well. You might actually find it easier at the end for using a 12, but a 10 will work. And I might actually have a 12 in my hand right now. I'm not sure. There we go. All right, got that threaded. And I'm going to pull down a lot. If you added the full length of thread, 75 to 90 inches, you'll want to pull it down a good, 15 inches or so. And then again, leaving that 30-inch tail, add a stop bead. And to add a stop bead, just pick up a size 10 seed bead, slide it down to where you have about 30 inches left of tail, and then come back up through that same bead in the direction that you strung it. Pull tight, and it should sit in place. Then pick up an 8mm bead, go through that. And now we're going to add arm beads around the side. I think I'll go with yellow this time. And I'm adding 8 to the needle. So I've got, let's see how many here. 8 in total. Bring that down. And now turn and go through the 8mm bead. Oops. There we go. and pull tight. Pick up one size 10 bead, that's a core bead. Bring that down on top of the last 8mm bead. Get a new 8mm bead. Add that. And bring that down. And then pick up 8 more, size 10. And I'm working these in different colors so you guys can see the role each of these beads is playing clearly from the other. But if you're working this at home and you want to use a solid, that's how I did these other ones. Solid colors. So there's that one. Again, pick up a core bead. And then an 8mm bead. And slide it down. Don't worry if it moves. It will be moving freely. Each of these arms will freely move from side to side until we lock them in at the next step. So don't worry about it too much. You can try to keep them in place, but it's not super critical if they get away. So there's 8 there. I'm going to check my count. Back up through. And I'm going to make this one just 4 beads in length so that I can make sure there's plenty of time. Pick up another core bead, go through the 8mm bead, bring it down. Five, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 on the needle. Come back up through the 8mm bead. Tighten it. And then at this point, you'll want to grab a clasp. If you're using a clasp that has a jump ring that's big enough to fit over your beads, you don't have to add the clasp now. You can just add 6 of your size 10 seed beads and make a loop right now and then add the clasp later. But if you're using one of the magnetics that has those, built in, you'll want to add it now because it's not going to fit over the loop later. So in that case, just add 3 size 10 seed beads, go through the clasp, and then add those other 3. And the next thing you want to do is come down through all 8 of these beads we added as an arm bead on the side here. Looks like I may have only added 7 in mine. Oops. That should still work though. So I'm going through all of them. Oh no, there's 8. There's a little hiding there. Okay. So that's attached there. And then what you'd want to do is reinforce it. So come back up through the 8. And go through all of the beads in the clasp again. I just went through 1. I'm going to go through the next 2 here. And it'll let me. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and I went through the clasp on that last pass there. Now I'm going to come down through all 3 of those seed beads here, and then go all around the arm beads again. There's there, there, and there. Okay. All right, so I'm exiting from the last of those beads that we looped around the arm in the last step. And I'm going to pick up a new color. And it's 3 size 10 seed beads in my case. If you're using 11s, give a try using 4 just to see what you like. But these are 3 size 10s. Exiting from that last arm bead, that's size 10 arm bead. I'm going to skip the core bead. Don't go through it, just going over it. Go through all 8 of these arm beads over here. And what will happen when you do that is it locks your spiral in place. So I'll just keep going through here. This length I'm doing here would be cute for earrings. I went through all 8 of those, the ones that are around that bead. I'm picking up 3 more size 10 seed beads, skipping the core bead, going through these 8s on the other side. Here we go. I'm going to do that 2 more times really quick to get to the bottom. If you're using these magnetic clasps, your needle will keep getting stuck to it. It's okay. All right, here we go. Okay, 3 more size 10 beads. Skipping the core bead and going through the next over here. And I'm going to keep going through all 8 of those beads that we added around that 8mm bead. Sorry, that flipped upside down. There we go. It's moving on me. Okay. Okay, and so that's, if this was a full length bracelet, as I was explaining earlier, your working thread here would be getting pretty short. So you'd want to weave it in, and to do that, you go up through the 8mm bead and you know, go through the process we just covered for weaving in. In my case right now, I'm just setting it aside. Now switch to your tail thread, pull off the stop bead, or you can needle back through it. I think that's what I did last time. Whatever works for you is great. Thread a needle. Here's another size 10 beading needle. Okay, and then we're going to repeat what we did over here on this side. Pick up 3. If you're not using this kind of clasp and you want to just pick up all 6 and keep going, you can do that and add your hardware at the end, whatever your preference is there. It's great. If you're using these, you'll have to add it now. Pick up 3 more. And now I'm going to go through the arm beads again. So the side 8 beads. And I'm going to continue through all of them. So just the arm beads. So when you get to this spot, you'll notice those were our 3 beads that we used as crossover beads. Don't go through those. Just go through the 8 arm beads we added. And then come back up through the 8mm bead. And reinforce this connection again. I'm going to do that really quickly so I have time to show you adding the back. So going through those 3, go through the clasp, 3, and then all the arm beads again. So all my yellow beads. Okay, when you've gotten to the last arm bead, flip your work over. I'm going to get my old working thread out of the way here. Okay, so I'm exiting from, sorry about that, I hit my camera. There we go. Okay, exiting from the last size 10 bead here. Skip the core bead. Pick up 3 new size 10 seed beads. And go through the ones on the other side. So those are those arm beads from the other side. And see, it's going to do the same thing we did on the first side to the back side. Makes it an extra secure, you know, I guess way to get that wave to hold its shape. And we're at, let's see, we're at 54 minutes past the hour. So I think there's time for me to go ahead and just quickly zip through. Skipping the core bead. And going through just those arm beads. So you see how that looks. Again, if you're using 11s, try adding 4 for that step and not 3. I'm going through that. Okay, one more set of 3 for me here. Skipping the core bead and going through the arm beads. And that's the whole bracelet. At this point, we're weaving in and reinforcing. So what I would do next with this thread is bring it through here, reinforce that, come down through the 8, go through the next 8, and then use this arm to weave in, come down through this 8, use that arm to weave in, and so on. And that's it. Does anybody have questions about that?
Hi, Danielle, it's Carmi.
Hey.
A couple people have left you some wonderful comments on the sidebar, again, for a great class.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
So maybe if you just want to turn to your other camera so they can see you.
Oops,
and
yeah.
You did have some new people who really enjoyed their first class, which is really great news.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for trying our classes out, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. Let's see, it's I've got about 4 minutes. Do you guys want to see the next 2 classes?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Next week we're doing a brick stitch series, and it's going to be there's 3 different versions of the project. If you look at the handout, it'll show this one, which is, it's a brick stitch on ball chain. So it's done by adding size 8 seed beads row by row to a ball chain. And this one came out really cool. I liked the way it makes like a natural curve. And I'll show you guys how I made that fan look by just kind of tweaking herringbone stitch. So that's one. And that's not going to take long to demo. So I think we will also have time to go through another version, which uses a 2-hole tile. And that's, again, just brick stitching a 2-hole tile on ball chain. And that'll be a really fun one. There's also an advanced pattern in the PDF. And it uses super duos and a Czech glass drop. And so for this one, depending on how class goes, I'm going to take the time we need to show you guys the basic concept of the brick stitch. But once you get familiar with it, this will make sense to you. This was very easy to do. And I'll try to walk through how this was done too. And in the handout, there is a step-by-step, stitch-by-stitch for how this was made. And all of the parts are listed in there as well with the search numbers for the Michaels app and website. And then after that, on the next December class, we have an earring design. And this is another brick stitch project. But in this earring design, we're going to do something cool. We're going to make brick stitch fit onto a form that has a non-uniform shape. And so there's a little trick to that. And then you'll notice on the edging, the way that it's finished is a square stitch variation. And it's how we got the tassel to sit right in the center. So I'll show you guys that. That's the last class in December. And then after that, we'll show you guys January, which I'm working on February now. So lots to share with you guys, lots of exciting stuff ahead. And I want to say thank you for joining us tonight, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week. Bye, guys.